Welcome to my webinar on using commas. This webinar contains information that would be used by children in Key Stage 1 and above, and is designed to demonstrate how we teach children to use commas in their writing. I will discuss key vocabulary and methods that we use in classroom settings. This webinar is all about understanding what commas are actually for. Commas help us to organise our ideas on the page so that our writing flows logically. They also make sentences easier to read because they break information into manageable parts. Another important role of the comma is to show pauses or shifts in thought, almost like giving the reader a moment to breathe. The aim here isn't just to memorise where commas go, but to understand why we use them. When we know the purpose behind them, placing them correctly becomes much more intuitive. First, we're going to focus on using commas in a list, which is the first time children are often introduced to the comma. Whenever we have 3 or more items, we use commas to separate them so the sentence stays clear and easy to follow. For example, in the sentence, we bought apples, pears, bananas and grapes. The comma shows each item as a distinct part of the list. It's a simple rule, but it makes your writing much clearer. Now let's take a quick look at commas before conjunctions in lists, which is often referred to as an Oxford comma. When we list several items, we use the word and or before the final one. In primary writing, we don't normally put a comma before that last and. However, you might see a comma used before the final and in some books, and this is called the Oxford comma. It's optional and depends on the style of writing. For example, the bag was filled with pens, pencils, rubbers and rulers. Here, the final items are separated clearly, even without the additional comma. This slide is about using commas to separate main and subordinate clauses, which is taught in Key Stage 2, and is part of the writing process from Year 4 and above. If a sentence begins with a subordinate clause, we place a comma before the main clause to show that the introductory part has finished. For example, when the bell rang, the children lined up. The comma helps the reader pause before moving into the main action. But when the main clause comes first, we don't need a comma. For example, the children lined up when the bell rang. Here the sentence flows naturally without a pause. Now let's focus on commas with fronted adverbials, which is another skill that is taught from Year 4 onwards. Fronted adverbials are words or phrases that tell us how, when, or where something happens. They appear at the start of the sentence. Wherever we use a fronted adverbial, we follow it with a comma to show that the introductory information has finished. For example, after lunch we went outside, or in the distance a train whistled. The comma helps to separate the adverbial from the main part of the sentence, making it easier to read. Sometimes we use commas to add extra information. It's also known as parentheses. When we use commas to separate information that isn't essential to the main meaning of the sentence, it's extra detail that can be removed without changing the core message. For example, my brother, who is 10, loves football. If we take out the phrase, who is 10, the sentence still makes perfect sense. My brother loves football. These commas help the reader to recognise that the added information is just extra detail. Finally, let's have a look at how commas can help us to avoid confusion. Sometimes without a comma, a sentence can sound like it means something completely different. For example, let's eat, Grandma uses a comma to show that we are speaking to Grandma. But without the comma, let's eat, Grandma, it sounds like something very different. Commas can also guide the reader by showing where a pause should be, like in inside, the classroom was silent. The comma makes the meaning clearer and the sentence easier to follow. I hope you found this webinar helpful. Thank you for watching.